Right, everybody. I'm going to start now. It's clear that the change from Zoom to Teams has disrupted a lot of people who were registered to call, but I'm very mindful of your valuable time. So I'm going to start, and hopefully more people will join. So my name is Tim Fleming. I work as a strategic consultant for Silverfort. And Silverfort is a company that I hope you've got some information about, but work in the identity protection space. And in my time as the Deloitte Asia Pacific CIO, I was at Deloitte I was CIO for 20 odd years. I know only too well just what gaps there are particularly in legacy networks, Active Directory, and their inability to easily protect us from bad actors. There's been a lot of concentration about protecting the perimeter, but the ugly truth underneath it is that once that perimeter has been breached, and it will nearly always be breached, then the protections that we have inside the network are clearly ineffective, I believe. So Silverfort commissioned Osterman Research to actually put some numbers around this, to just say, well, let's talk to security professionals in the industry and let's see just how protected is our identity attack surface. And that's what this talk today is all about. Firstly, what is the identity attack surface? So that includes all the digital identities and credentials and all the organizational resources that can be accessed with them. So it's much more about inside your network than just the perimeter of your network. And as we know, attacks that use the identity attack surface as their battlefield, they use compromised identities to get in, and then it's all too easy for them to obtain credentials with greater access to be able to move their way around the network. And remember that lateral movement inside a network, while you might be breached in a variety of methods, it might be zero-day attacks on web servers and things like that. Once you're inside the network, in order to move around laterally and to really cause damage, you need to use identities. So you will compromise identities inside the network. So we want to talk about, well, how resilient is our identity attack service? What defense in depth do we have to actually detect and prevent? Prevent is the key message, malicious access. Now, I will pause at the moment to let you know that in about 2017, Deloitte was hacked, and it was an identity-based attack. And so I have seen at very close quarters just what a well-organized attacker can do once they're inside a network, and all the gaps that exist or did exist in their ability to actually detect and block these things. So Deloitte went through a major upgrade, spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars extra on cybersecurity. However, at the end of that multi-year program, when we had things like a SOC that was a 24/7 global SOC, we had perimeter defenses hugely enhanced. We were still vulnerable, and we were still largely vulnerable because people get phished. And when people get phished, that enables the internal, the first breach of the perimeter, and they can get into the network. From there, it's all too easy without proper protection for them to obtain credentials that have greater authority to affect multiple machines, servers, services, and to wreak some real damage. And that is exactly the problem that Silverfort is here to correct. But let's go back to the Osterman Research and talk about, what are we talking about here? We're talking about organizational resources accessed with user credentials. So account takeover, enabling lateral movement across the network, and things like internal ransomware spread. Once the attacker has access to a privileged account that can attack multiple devices, potentially thousands of devices, then attacks like ransomware, certainly data theft, are just all too easy. Specifically, we're talking about three types of users: our standard users, our administrative users, so our IT people and IT contractors who have administrative access to services on our network, and then the service accounts themselves, the non-human accounts that run a lot of our services. And PAM is an attempt to protect admin users and service accounts from exactly the type of exploitation that I've just been thinking of. Unfortunately, it's easier said than done. MFA, most of you, I would hope, will have MFA for your standard users when you want them, when they're coming in to access your network. The problem of getting MFA across all your assets is a lot of what we're talking about today, and up until today is often not possible. Service accounts, actually discovery and monitoring of service account behavior. I know only too well how easy it is for there to be a sprawl of service accounts or single service accounts using across multiple services that might be against the way your policies are set for your IT department, but these things inevitably happen. So when Osterman did the survey, what they're actually trying to find is, what is the coverage? What percentage of protected users are covered? And what percentage of protected resources are covered? And then they talk about confidence. And I do want to talk about this a lot because the numbers are frankly a bit surprising, and I'll talk about that later. But the confidence level on your overall ability to have visibility, to detect malicious access attempts, but also to be able to block them. I'll stop at this stage just to talk for a minute, because ITDR, detect and respond, is a big part of the overall IT marketing push that's going on at the moment. You'll see lots of people talking about ITDR, but it is detect and respond, and not only is it incomplete because it requires policy to be set in place to trigger an alert on a particular event, but it also is after the fact. What many people refer to of right of boom, and that means something bad's already happened, and maybe we've detected it. So, in my mind, that's complete, and it's certainly not protection. It's certainly not blocking. The population that was surveyed, we got 650 responses from identity security teams worldwide. So Osterman and Silverfort would say that this is the first report that actually sheds light on the actual coverage and effectiveness of existing identity protection measures. I'm going to go through the report highlights now and concentrate on a few numbers that come up here that you might find surprising, but I think if you look at your own environment, you might find that a lot of it is also true for you. First thing is that hybrid identity infrastructure is the norm. So most organisations rely on a hybrid identity infrastructure. Now that will typically be something like Azure Active Directory, or I think they've changed it to something else at the moment, but yeah, it's Azure Active Directory and Legacy Active Directory. You've got two identity stores. And at the moment, the Active Directory, your on-premise, does not talk well with your Azure Active Directory, which has the more modern security controls. So as we can see, 82.4% of organisations have a hybrid deployment. A few are on-premise only, and a few, 8%, are cloud only. So now the question being asked is, MFA, what gaps are we seeing in the coverage? And I frankly was a little shocked by these numbers, but if you have a look at it, that 15% of respondents are saying that only up to 25% of their resources are covered by MFA. The vast majority are less than 75%. Only 3.1% of those respondents, so that's possibly 20 people out of that 650, 20 organisations have said they have 100% coverage of not only MFA for standard users, but also remote access, PowerShell, PSExec, RDP, all sorts of things, VDI, VPN. It's a stunning low number. So almost nobody has 100% coverage across their landscape using MFA. And in most cases, it's because it's very difficult or impossible to do until today. So now do we talk about user coverage? Again, applying MFA protection for admins and other sensitive users is the common practice, but standard users are often excluded from MFA protection. And as we find with all the large-scale attacks, the successful attacks that make it into the media, it is nearly always a standard user whose identity is compromised in one way or another that enables the initial access into the network. And so you're going to, and then from then, there are a variety of methods that they can use to extract the credentials of more powerful accounts. All right. Another big initiative that I'm sure many of you are either thinking about or involved in and working through is privileged access management. Now, privileged access management as a solution was brought in to try and implement more controls under administration accounts and service accounts that or all the accounts in our network that have the higher privileges. As you can see from these numbers, 10% of people who have answered this, 10% of that 600 and so only 65 odd people, 66 people, organisations rather, say that they have fully deployed PAM and all privileged accounts are onboarded and protected. I know again from my experience that getting to 100% coverage is very difficult with large, complex and legacy systems, and it's also very difficult to stay at the 100%. So the promise of protecting all your elevated privilege accounts through PAM is clearly not been sufficient. And if you look at some of the more, the bigger publicly available breach news, like Uber last year, they had PAM, they had MFA everywhere, they had PAM, but that was still not enough for them to be caused serious problems. So I expect that many of you are struggling through PAM, and as you can see from these numbers, that at least more than a third of users are either encountering difficulties or we've partially deployed and they have basically stopped. And another 30% have only just started implementing or don't have a PAM. So the promise of this being the savior of all your privileged access accounts is just proven to be very difficult. As you can see, an alarming number of organisations are encountering onboard difficulties which they can't easily resolve. So if you're going through that yourself, then one, you can take comfort from the fact that you're not alone. Just about everybody is struggling, but also you need to know, and you need to, I think, just be comfortable with the fact that you are not protected, and those privileged accounts are not all protected. Service accounts, i.e. non-human accounts, are one of the areas that typically will give you really high-powered access into a service. Again, these numbers are very alarming. 5.7% of people are saying that they have full visibility of all their service accounts. And just in the same way that you can't be a little bit pregnant, if you've got even 75% of your service accounts that are visible to you and the other 25 aren't, then you are exposed. You are exposed until you can guarantee that you've got 100% that you are not only visible to you, but you have some proper controls over the usage of those service accounts. These are alarming numbers. Now, even more so, when we go into this next slide, which first thing I see from this, particularly on the lateral movement, how 22% of respondents can say they have high confidence when, if we go back a slide, we see that only 5.7% have full visibility of their service accounts, let alone admin accounts, let alone standard user accounts. How can you possibly have high confidence? If I speak personally, I always took the assumption, particularly after we suffered the breach in 2017, I always took the point of view that it is inevitable that you will be breached. It is inevitable that some of your people are going to be phished and that they're going to enable access some way onto your network. And really, the battle is, what can they do after they get in? Because if you are working on the assumption that you can always stop people from getting into your network, then I'm afraid you're operating under a misapprehension. If someone really wants to get in, they will get in. So I take this is the point of view rather than factual. So we have, half the population think they're able to stop some movement, but not all. Once again, that's not, you can't be a little bit pregnant, you're exposed. So the great majority of you on this call, just like around the world, are going to have the potential to be exposed by your admin accounts, by your service accounts, no matter what perimeter protections you have in place. The research then asked the question about, have you experienced an identity-related breach? And as you can see, the vast majority of people, so we got talking about 84%, 83, 84% have said, yep, we have been breached. Of that, half of them have happened in the last year. So if I go back 10 years, the prevailing point of view around cybersecurity was, if you can make it just a little bit difficult for an attacker, they'll go on and attack somebody else. Nowadays, what these sorts of numbers are telling you is you will be attacked just by the weight of numbers. Sooner or later, you will be attacked. And so if you don't have the protections, both on the perimeter and inside the network, you're going to be in trouble. And Osterman's summary, pretty much what I think a lot of us already knew, but we've actually got numbers to back it up now. Organisations are critically exposed to threats such as account takeover, lateral movement, ransomware spread. This was exactly the situation I was in a couple of years ago when I was still at Deloitte. And I was faced with the knowledge that we had an extremely sophisticated perimeter. We had a very sophisticated SIEM and SOC. And yet the Deloitte Red team, the white hat hackers that went around checking the security of the Deloitte network, were still able, through phishing practitioners, they were still able to get into the network, move around, and obtain high-level credentials without sending an alert that for the SOC to action. And this was a huge concern with me, and it was at this time that I saw a demonstration of the Silverfort product. And there was my realization, and actually, yes, there is a solution to this. There is a solution that sees every authentication and works on the premise that I don't care who you are, do I like what you're about to do? It's left of boom. It's at the state of authentication. If it's not sure about something, it can induce MFA from any service that authenticates. And if it really doesn't like it, it just simply blocks it. So for me, this Silverfort came along, and Silverfort is the one that delivers what you need, a defense in depth at your own network level for adequate, I would say, identity protection. So how can we solve these gaps? We have I'm not going to go into today into detail about the product. In a minute, I'll show you a slide that has got a QR code that I would urge you to click on that and book a demonstration and perhaps your own risk assessment. We can put this simply and elegantly and without interrupting anything else on your network, put the solution onto your network and tell you where all your gaps are. So I would encourage you, if you see yourself in any of these numbers today, to really take the time to explore something which, for me at Deloitte, it solved the problem. It absolutely solved the problem. So here is the QR code. Please feel free to click on this, and the Silverfort will be in touch to organise a demonstration and a detailed talk about the product and just how it works. I will say that the one of the many great things about the product is that there are no proxies, there are no agents. You just need to implement this sitting in a virtual machine in your network, and it sees every authentication in the network. You can put MFA onto resources without actually touching those services themselves. For instance, General Motors use it to put MFA onto their IBM mainframe that runs their production line. That was something that was going to cost many millions of dollars if they actually had to change the mainframe application. They were able to do it in a matter of weeks through the implementation of Silverfort, and they were so happy with the solution. They're not only a client, they're also an investor in the company. So I'll leave this up while I ask if anyone has got any questions, anything that they would like to discuss, and otherwise I can give you some time back, but I'd like you to please hop on if you've got a question. Okay, doesn't look like we're getting any questions, so I'm going to give you your time back. Thank you for taking the time, and apologies again for the change in Teams moving to Teams from Zoom. But please click on the link, register your details, and someone from the company will be in touch with you to talk about further information about a product demonstration so you can see for yourself how this will work and how it will protect you. Thanks very much for your time, and we shall leave now. Goodbye.